Are we done? Is that the lingerers? Right. Okay. Hello. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. It's been a bit of a day already, so we'll get on with it. Thank you very much for Rosemary for letting us be part of the Food GRP Day. Okay, and thank you. Thanks for coming. Well, I think the first thing to say is that I've always loved farms. Ever since I was a child. I used to have a toy farm. Well, I guess most people did, didn't they? I've been in theatre for, well, decades now, really. But I always really wanted to be a farmer. I just love the countryside. I love the fresh air, the scent of the new mown hay. I love the lambs gambling in the fields. I love an owl hooting in the woods. The crunch of frost under your feet on a cold February morning. It just makes me, well, actually it makes me want to read poetry. So I am going to do a quick little bit of it. The tangled hedgerows, where the cows push out impatient horns and tolerant churning mouths twixt dripping ash boughs. Hedgerows all alive with birds and gnats and large white butterflies which look as if the Mayflower had caught life and palpitated forth upon the wind. Hills, vales, woods, netted in a silver mist. Farm granges doubled up among the hills, and cattle grazing in the watered vales, and cottage chimneys smoking from the woods, and cottage gardens smelling everywhere, bemused with smells of orchards. That's Elizabeth Barrett Browning, The Herefordshire Landscape. So, could I be a farmer? Well, I always listen to the Archers, and even sometimes Farming Today, although that is at 5:45 in the morning. And I have watched all of This Farming Life on TV, and Farmers Weekly, for example, is always publishing stories about people who leave the offices for the open fields and never ever look back. And I read this blog where a woman called Kat said, could I be a farmer even though I have absolutely no farming experience or qualifications and don't come from a farming family or even a family that will consider it a wise career choice? And some people said, follow your heart. Other people said, talk to farmers first and try working on a farm. Obviously, if I were to be a farmer, I would need to find out more. So, I've been looking at some statistics. Now, you probably know all of these, but quite a few of them came as a surprise to me. For example, 3/4 of British land is farmed. Now, about 20% of that grows crops for food, and most of the rest of it grows grass for the livestock. In the last 50 years, the average size of a UK farm rose from 100 acres to over 2,500 acres. And 30,000 of those smaller farms have disappeared over the last 10 years because of consolidation. Now, the UK produces only about half the food it eats, and 1/3 of that goes to waste. Almost half the farm workers in fruit and vegetables are seasonal workers from the EU, which of course is making people very nervous right now because of Brexit. And less than 1% of all British workers work on farms. And according to DEFRA, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, 84% of all farm holders are men. And the average age of a UK farmer is 59 years old. And women make up 28% of the 1%, which is the British agricultural workforce. DEFRA has found that the number of female farmers has risen slowly, steadily, to 25,000 in 2017. But the number of male farmers dropped by 5,000 in just 1 year. And 25% more women than men enrol in agriculture courses at university. So, what do I learn from all these statistics? Well, farming is not easy. There isn't much land left, so it's probably quite hard to get hold of a farm. Most farmers are ageing, and all the young men are leaving, and more women are coming into farming. So, what's going on here? If it's so difficult, are the women nuts? I mean, why are more and more women coming into farming all of a sudden?
Women have always been involved in farming, particularly on family farms. They've been central in terms of whether that's, feeding the men for harvest, whether it's actually been helping out, milking, right through to driving tractors.
Well, she should know. That's Caroline Drummond, who is founder and executive director of LEAF, Linking Environment and Farms, and she's not alone in her claim.
There's always been lots of women involved in farming. You just haven't seen them. The housewife that does the books and the accounts, the daughter that does the mucking out, there's women in the background, frankly, with all due respect to these guys that work so hard, so hard, they are supported by women.
So Sarah Dawson has done all those jobs growing up on her family farm in Lincolnshire. Now this is a farm that was built brick by her grandparents just after the Second World War, and where her grandmother, Frieda Pettit, who's now 92 years old, still lives. So I went to visit Frieda, who started driving a tractor at 13 years old and spent her life planting, harvesting and selling at market. Were there a lot of women working on the farm when you started, Frieda? Can you remember?
I'd say most of it was women, because all the men was still in the forces. 46, I think it was, round about there. They were entirely run by women, because there was a land army, you see.
Yes, but Frieda's talking about the war period, isn't she? I mean, all the men had gone away, so farms, like everything else, were run by women. So, if women have always been in agriculture, why have I always thought of it as a man's world? I mean, why do we say the farmer and the farmer's wife? We don't say the farmer and the farmer's husband, do we? I went to visit Emma Hamer next. She lives and works on a small family-run cattle and arable farm in Oxfordshire, and so I asked her whether or not her responsibilities around the farm were different from her husband's, or whether they worked as a team. I mean, how does it work out?
Well, I guess he's the farmer and I'm the farmer's wife. Having said that, he is away a lot with his work, so I take on the farmer role then. In the past, it hasn't always been like that, because I've looked after the cattle more. Before I had the job with the NFU, I was more of an input with the cattle. However, he's the tractor driver and the combine driver and the sprayer operator, so he's much more the farmer. I have a more supportive role.
Yeah, but don't you ever drive the tractor?
I do, yeah. I have to. I mean, I enjoy it, but I'm not as mechanically minded, so I find it a little bit more stressy, whereas he's more natural.
Yes, but Emma isn't just the farmer's wife, is she? Because when I asked her what else she did on the side, this is what she told me. Now, listen to this.
So my title is Senior Plant Health Advisor at the NFU. So I work in the policy division, and I'm a sort of an interface between the NFU members and politicians. So we have about 50,000 farming members who have, our job is to help them to farm, help them give the tools to allow them to farm. So I lobby governments and regulators to try and improve legislation and regulation in this country to be more enabling to allow farmers to produce food. So that involves talking to DEFRA, talking to civil servants, talking to the minister even sometimes, talking to our regulators who are the HSE or the Chemicals Regulation Division up in York. And we also have a role within Brussels because a lot of our policies come from Brussels, so it involves going up to Brussels and trying to influence the decisions that are made there.
So this is good. Women aren't just helping in the background, they are the farmers, as well for many of them as taking on important senior roles in key farming organisations such as the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board, the National Farmers Union, LEAF or DEFRA, to name a few. This is Stock's farm in the Malvern Hills. Ali Kappa employs 65 seasonal staff to plant and harvest 100 acres of apples, eating and cider, and 100 acres of hops, which make 46 million pints of beer.
I wear a number of different hats. The main big role is I chair the NFU's National Horticulture and Potatoes Board, so that is one of 6 commodity boards at the National Farmers Union, and ours looks after the commercial growers of fruit, veg, plants and flowers. I'm a director of the British Hop Association now, and I chair our breeding programme, which is called Y Hops. And in the Appley world, I'm a director of our producer organisation, that's a cooperative. The second part of our apple business is cider, and I get involved in some of the price negotiation and industry issues.
On Lowe farms in Kent, Marion Regan's family has been growing soft fruit for over 100 years. She employs 500 seasonal workers, and she is sole supplier of strawberries to the tennis championships at Wimbledon, as well as selling to Tesco's and Sainsbury's.
I don't directly supervise a lot of the work on the farm now. I have a great team of people here. We have a production director. I'm the managing director, so my role is increasingly strategic and basically acting as an arbiter between competing sort of needs on the farm.
This is Susannah Bolton. I asked Susannah to tell me about her job at the AHDB.
My job, it's an extraordinary job actually. I'm Director of Knowledge Exchange across all 6 sectors of agriculture that we cover within AHDB. So that's cereals, horticulture, potatoes, beef and lamb, pork and dairy. It's, I think, one of the most exciting roles in agriculture that a person could have, because it's right at that interface between research, innovation and technical development and what's happening on the ground, on farm and in practice.
Deep in her laboratory is, of course, Rosemary Collier, that you know well. Now, Rosemary's research is into integrated pest management strategies in horticultural crops. She's also, of course, director of the Warwick University Crop Centre, as well as being an academic in the Department of Life Sciences. Here's Charlotte Hollins, who at 21 years old became co-director of the first community-owned farm in the UK.
Originally I was working hand in hand with Ben on the farm, but since we put the farm into community ownership, I've become more and more office-based, I guess, and a little bit less out on the farm. So I now am manager of the Fordhall Community Land Initiative, which is the community trust which owns Fordhall Farm, and I manage the staff base here. We've got about 18 staff that run all of the various activities here at Fordhall.
These are great jobs. These women have great jobs. They have masses of responsibility. So what I wondered next was, if this is the man's world that it's perceived to be, and most of the women that we met have these high-profile, responsible positions, for many of them as well as running their own family farms, how difficult was it for them to get there? Have there been barriers because of being a woman?
No. It's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that is good.
No. I personally have not experienced those. My friends and those people that I work with, no. There are some industries, but actually in agriculture, no. The industry is very open to women and the opportunities, without a doubt.
So I think being one of 2 girls in the family, I think that I never had any thought that there was anything holding one back as a woman.
Well, that's good. But some of the women that we spoke to did add a few qualifications.
I am very often one of only a couple of women in a large room full of men, particularly at the senior management level, and occasionally it does strike me. I think, goodness, this is a very male environment.
My father said to me when I was expected to consider what I was going to do with my life, don't get involved with farming. It's not for girls. Okay, you go off and do something else. You go and have your own career doing. I'll support you, whatever you want to do. I'll encourage you. You go farming. It's not for girls.
Really difficult to find fit women's clothes to wear. Yes.
Yes.
I bought 2 pairs of trousers in the last 2 weeks, and they're both men's.
And they don't fit properly.
And they don't
There's
fit
no,
properly.
there's
I've
no
had to
hips
buy
and
ones
thigh
with-
space.
Yeah, I've had to buy a size bigger to get my bum in. No, they're too long. Yeah. I found one pair that were covered in flowers, which was about the token female pair, which I didn't want to buy. But yeah, so I've been buying men's work trousers.
No, they don't fit
They
properly.
don't fit.
Men's work trousers, but they're you have to get them wider to fit you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they don't fit you, and they're not long enough.
I wouldn't mind wearing men's trousers if I could run the farm, let's face it. Now, Marion Regan told me a very funny story on her strawberry farm. She has a main tractor driver who is a woman.
One of our lady operators was mowing a steep-sided bank a couple of years ago, and as she was mowing, she noticed somebody taking pictures of her, and she thought, is there something wrong? Am I a bit wonky? Have I set it up right? Why is he taking pictures? Maybe I'm not operating safely. Maybe it is a bit steep. So she went back to the yard and to check and said, I'm not sure I was doing it right. And then she saw the guy was taking pictures, and he said, oh no, he said, I've just never seen a woman driving a tractor before.
When she was a girl on a farm, she did a childlike thing. One day, she asked her father to give her a garden plot to sow and tend and reap herself. And he said, why not? In casting about for a corner, he thought of an idle bit of walled-off ground where a shop had stood, and he said, just it. And he said, that ought to make you an ideal one-girl farm and give you a chance to put some strength on your Slim Jim arm. It was not enough of a garden, her father said, to plough, so she had to do it all by hand. But she don't mind now. A hill each of potatoes, cabbages, carrots, peas, tomatoes, beets, beans, pumpkins, corn, and even fruit trees. How did you actually get into farming, Emma?
Well, I think I must have been about 5 when I got given a farm for Christmas. I don't come from a farming background. I do come from a science background. My mum was a biologist and my dad was a vet, but I loved my farm. So for all my childhood, I wanted to work on a farm. When I left university, I got a job milking cows, a summer job. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I only lasted 4 months, and so I sort of rethought, did I want to be involved in agriculture after that? However, a few years later, I met Martin, who's my husband now, and he farmed, so I did get back into it, but it was through marriage rather than through an agricultural career.
Well, I've always liked animals and understanding their behaviour, and so when I was at school I thought I'd like to be a vet, so I went to work for the vet for a while, but it became apparent that at that time, if you were female, you could only work with dogs and cats and small animals, and I wanted to work with large animals. So I changed my mind. I went to study zoology, and then when I was looking for a career, the only two subjects really where there are a reasonable number of jobs were insects and fish, so I chose insects.
I actually did a master's at Warwick University in environmental sciences, and my previous degree was in biology, and looked a lot at sort of ecosystems and environments, and really enjoyed that. And then agriculture was a really practical application for a lot of that knowledge.
But have you actually ever worked on a farm?
Never, no. I actually grew up in London, so came a bit of a roundabout route to it.
Were you born into a farming family, Frieda?
Not really, but my grandma was on the farming side. But my father was a policeman, and he came out the forces and went in for strawberry growing at Wisbech.
Which is near here.
Yes. And then he bought a farm the other side of Boston, and my eldest sister married the youngest boy of the Pettit people who was farming.
So, it seems that you can get into farming any which way, really. Some people are born into it, some people marry a farmer, some people don't know anything about it but get there through studying. Some people even retire and then become farmers. Like that woman and her husband that I saw on This Farming Life, who gave up being barristers in the city to become crofters on a Hebridean island. What must their daily life be like? Cold, probably. I asked the women that we met, what is a typical day down on the farm? Well, of course, they said to me, oh, no, there's no typical day. Every day is the same, even down to, well, especially the weather. So I asked, well, what do you wear for a start?
I wore caterpillar boots, good pair of woolen socks, not this nylon stuff.
Okay.
It's got to be full 100% wool, keep feet warm. Invariably jeans, sometimes thermals underneath.
Yep, got the thermals and that.
A good belt.
Yep, got the belt.
Long bending, got to keep trousers up. Lots of layers in the winter, not a lot in the summer.
No.
And always a body warmer with lots of pockets.
Got the body warmer.
Yeah. Oh, sometimes. Oh, in the winter, I've got a flat cap. Of course, I've got a flat cap.
Of course, I've got
Big
a flat
scarf,
cap.
big coat.
Of course, I've got a flat cap.
No gloves.
Why no gloves? I've got gloves.
Always needing to answer a phone, have a pen, drive a vehicle,
No gloves on.
get your hands dirty.
Okay.
No time for gloves on and off, on and off.
No.
Never had nice nails.
Neither have I.
Never had nice. Always short,
Yeah.
no varnish.
Perfect.
Yes, always. Sometimes makeup, sometimes not, depending on how I felt.
Makeup.
Hair up mostly. Wind, just rushing around, you know.
Wind.
But yeah, and sometimes not a lot. Shorts,
Shorts, got them.
still caterpillar boots.
Got the caterpillar
Shorts,
boots.
little top.
Yes.
In the winter, caterpillar boots, good socks,
Yeah, good socks.
thermals, lots of layers, big coats.
Big coat, got the big
Yes.
coat. Wait a minute. Big coat. Okay. Okay, so what's a typical day, Marion, down on the strawberry farm, let's say?
This time of year, a typical day will involve getting up pretty early. We start at 5. I will meet the guys quite often up in the office. There's a gathering of everybody, the irrigation team leader, the tunnel team leader, the harvest team, all meet early in the morning. So I'd like to catch that. We also have a gathering at 8 in the morning where we look at all of our shelf life samples of what we're actually sending each day. So we meet in the pack house with just the sort of key members of the team, and we put all the punnets on the table that we've kept from previous days sending to have a look at any quality issues, and that's a good time to catch up and just to see. I like to be at that meeting every morning at 8 o'clock, and then really it varies. I go round the fields, visit the guys that are picking, just keep an eye on how things are going on. I spend quite a bit of time in and out of the pack house looking at what's being dispatched. I'm a director of our marketing cooperative, so there will always be meetings and things involved with that, and a lot of customer interaction. We have visits from Marks and Spencers and Waitrose, and so I do a lot of, I handle all of those. And increasingly on the technical side, I will try and squeeze in some crop walking during the day and actually just walk some of the fields and just have a look at how the plants look and any pest and disease issues that other people have alerted me to or I can find myself.
So this is very hard work, isn't
Yes,
it?
or with others. I mean, we have 2 or 3 agronomists who come and visit the farm at regular intervals, so it's quite good to go with them sometimes because they're very good at spotting things. Or it's also a good thing to do by yourself in the early evening.
I don't mind the hard work. Potatoes, cabbages, lettuce, peas. Because they're doing something special. They're making a real difference. Tomatoes, beets, beans, pumpkins, corn. Ali Kappa, for example, has almost single-handedly changed the way we think about British beer.
We had a frost on our fruit in 2011, and a frost on your fruit basically knocks out half your crop, and if you take away half the turnover, you have no means of making profit. So we, not surprisingly, brought in a consultant to have a look at the whole business. Our hops, whilst they were covering costs, weren't making any profit. And that was quite a big moment for my husband and I. And actually his reaction to that was to spend 3 weeks saying, right, we're going to grub the lot. And I had spent, I suppose, up to that point, about 18 months getting to understand the industry, going to some of the industry meetings, understanding where we were at with new varieties, and worked out that actually we weren't doing anything to market the crop. In the true sense of marketing, I don't mean selling. I'm from a marketing background, that's what I used to do in London. So I actually sat back and challenged Richard and said, well, do you know what, I think if we could get the industry to think about itself differently, and it will be quite a big piece of work, but if we could rebrand ourselves and talk about ourselves differently, then maybe we could change the whole thing and turn the whole thing around. Richard said, okay, you've got 3 years. So I did go off on a bit of a mission. The first stage of that was to convince what was quite a small committee of the industry that we should in fact rebrand the industry and we should have a website and be brave about what we're doing. And instead of hiding in the warehouse and waiting for somebody to find us, which is what we were doing, we should be proud of what we were doing and get up on the rooftop and start talking about, and indeed shouting about where we could be proud of something, about what we were doing. And we just started to change the conversation. So what do I mean by that? I suppose just by taking every opportunity to talk to the trade, so to brewers, to hop merchants, to beer drinkers, about British hops and why they were exciting and why people should get behind, support and buy them. And do the same in our overseas export markets. So we're still growing hops, so I guess you can sort of tick that box. We're making a lot more money from our hops now. We're making a sensible profit from our hops now. Sensible as in enough that we can reinvest in our business, which is what we need to do.
Now, according to Ali, there are over 30 varieties of commercially grown British hops. Now, these hops have, and I quote, fewer peaks in aroma intensity but more breadth. Would you like to help yourself? This gives them more delicate and more complex flavours. Would you like to help yourself? This is due to their, and I quote again, statistically lower levels of myrcene because of our cloudy maritime climate. So they're drinkable, delicate and very complex. And I think basically what that means is you can have glass after glass after glass, something that we know how to do in Great Britain, certainly. Now, popular types, maybe I could offer you those and then we could sort of send it off back to the second row. I think Susan's got some more, so don't panic, there's enough for everybody. And we've got lots of bottles. These, so popular types, she told me, are Goldings, which have spicy honey and floral aromas, and Fuggle, that beauty. Fuggle, which is woody, minty and earthy. I don't know if we've got any Fuggle in there. I think there's a bit in the dark one. There's a dark one over there. Brewers these days, they're sort of like master chefs, aren't they? They're always seeking out these new aroma combinations and flavours. I read on the website you can get light cheese and grapefruit, which for beer is an interesting combination, or orange and tangerine spice, or even, this is good, chocolate and molasses. But the thing is, Ali has already changed the world of beer, so I can't do that. Now, this is what Sarah Dawson did.
My own interest introduced a particular crop into the farm business.
Which was?
Purple sprouting broccoli.
My favourite.
Well, that's interesting. So I grew a quarter of an acre and through a local distributor sold it to the restaurants in London, such as the Ivy and different restaurants. So I got some seed and I had the seed raised and I physically, with the help of father and others at the end of a planting run, set this quarter of an acre with this purple sprouting broccoli. So, and I nurtured this like a baby because nobody else was interested in it. It was just purely down to me, and it was suggested that I was wasting my time anyway. But anyway, the point was that I had somebody that was interested in buying it, who was selling it to some of the top restaurants in London. And so I harvested it myself, packed it myself, off it went, and it was successful. And so the following year I grew a little bit more, and the following year I grew a little bit more, and I planted it, I nursed it, I harvested every single stalk, I packed it. At this point I had to get father and brother involved because there was rather a lot and I needed help with packing and wrapping and doing different things. This went on for about 3, possibly 4 years. And there was interest when I was talking, as I do, because I'm good at that, I do a lot of that, with one of the supermarkets. He said, well, we might be interested in that. And I said, okay, well, so we grew a little bit more, and I supplied the supermarket, and it went really well, so we grew a lot more. Again, still to the annoyance of my father, particularly, because he couldn't see the point, because the mainstay of the business was cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage. This is what we do, grow hundreds of acres of this stuff, and you want to mess about, cause me aggravation with this poxy queer gear that takes a lot of looking after. You deal with that. You just deal with that. Now it was getting to a point where I couldn't just deal with this on my own. So then I got my father and brother in there harvesting, particularly me, actually. I'll take claim for this. When I was harvesting the crop, I got the highest yields that we've ever had since. Yeah, so the supermarket really liked it. Got it in the supermarket. Other supermarkets saw they'd got it, wanted it. So I grew the business, and with my father and brother's support, grew the business. At which point I had to literally hand it over to them because we're talking 50, 60, 70 acres at this point. When it became a relatively important part of the business that we were still producing sprouts. Well, because of the popularity of it, and it was perceived as a new vegetable. It never is, it's an old vegetable, but it's a new vegetable in terms of the exposure it got to the general public through the supermarket. It really took hold and people really understood the intrinsic health values of it as well, and it's delicious, and so it grew exponentially, frankly. Then we're in a position where we had to make a decision. Did we want to expand, or did we want to take the strategic view that we were still a family farm? And the decision was taken at the time that no, we didn't want to expand exponentially. I wasn't here full time, I'd got my own full-time job. Had I probably been here, we probably would have done that, but at the time it was decided that we had enough to do, which then opened the door to others needing to fill the gap of demand that we couldn't satisfy because of the growth. And so pepper sprouting and broccoli was in all the supermarkets then, you see, and today it's the mainstay of the business. We stopped growing cauliflower, we stopped growing broccoli, we stopped growing cabbage, we stopped growing sprouts, and we now wholly, solely focus as a small family business on pepper sprouting broccoli.
And is your father proud of you?
In many ways, yes. Of course. But then it's not something that you hear very often.
She's great though, isn't she? She's taken a new vegetable. No, she's reintroduced an old vegetable which is delicious. She's influenced the British diet and she's made a success of it. I could do that. I could find a new vegetable because Caroline Drummond told me that we only eat 12 plant species out of the 300,000 that we could eat. You see, I thought it would be difficult to make my mark on farming as a woman, but these women are very successful, aren't they? They're facing scepticism, they're fighting it, they're innovating and they're succeeding. So, is this because they're doing things differently? How are women doing things differently?
Women tend to be calmer, they tend to be more aware of some of the softer stuff that goes on with people and relationships.
Even if it's just being a bit disruptive on occasion, but a little bit challenging, a little bit questioning about whether this is actually, whether the perceived wisdom is the right way to go about things.
I think it is helpful to have women as part of the image of farming.
I think women are more empathetic.
In terms of that I've come across as kind of automatically seem to go to organics and this small agriculture rather than, I don't know about you, Becca, but I haven't seen many who decide to go into like industrial, commercial kind of large scale agriculture.
Personally, I think we probably do a lot of holding together. Is trying to bring that social aspect to the family life in the farm. Men can be not quite so talkative sometimes.
Some of the women that I know in agriculture now and some of the roles are fantastic marketeers, fantastic ambassadors for, promoting healthy food, communicating that to the wider general.
Certainly I was much more talkative, much more engaging with the wider community, and Ben just wanted to get on the farm. And he just wanted to do his bit, he wanted to go out with his cows, just scurry away and just be on his own and walk amongst his cows and so forth, whereas I love having people around and thrive off it.
You need to be very comfortable in communicating and spending, as I said earlier, spending your summer sharing it with hundreds of people from other countries, literally on your doorstep. That is normal if you're a strawberry grower. And I don't know, maybe women feel more relaxed about that than men.
More often than not, the women in farming are working with bigger groups of people because they see that as adding value. The more traditional way of thinking from an agricultural male perspective is that it's a hindrance.
Agriculture is very often not just about managing the land, it's also very largely about people management, and consider that as part of the long-term investment in the business.
Charlotte Hollins was only 21 when her farm was threatened. Her family were threatened they had to leave. The family had been on this farm for generations. Her father, Arthur Hollins, developed it into the first organic farm in England. And Charlotte was born on the farm and had lived there all her life. Now, they were tenant farmers, which meant that they worked the land, but they didn't own it, and they could be asked to leave, which was exactly what happened in 2004. The landowner wanted to sell the land, the family had to buy or leave. So Charlotte and her brother, Ben, they started a crowdfunding campaign to raise £800,000 to save Fordhall Farm. They did it, and Fordhall became the first community-owned farm in the UK with 8,000 members.
We were about to be evicted due to development moving this way, but we were successful to raise £800,000 to secure it from industrial development, place it into community ownership, and it's now owned by an amazing 8,000 people right across the world.
Right across the world? You mean I can be a member of Fordhall Farm?
Yeah, as are people randomly in Hong Kong, Bahrain, America, New Zealand, obviously a lot of local people and across the UK as well.
And is this a financial ownership, or do some of the members actually work on the farm?
They don't work on the farm. Some of them might come and volunteer on our volunteer weekends, but it is a non-financial investment. It's more of an altruistic investment. It's an investment in the future. They've invested to secure Fordhall Farm, to remove the development potential away from the farm, and to provide affordable and accessible routes for young people into agriculture. So my brother Ben, at the time in his early 20s, took on the tenancy agreement from the community landlord. He had a 100-year tenancy agreement, succession rights in for his children. He then has complete security to farm the land here through his lifetime and his children's lifetime, and then the community trust which owns the farm is here to own it, provide that opportunity, but use it as a community resource. And at the heart of that is increasing awareness of food and farming. So we organise school visits, events, glamping in our yurts. We have a youth project which works with young people at the point of exclusion from school. We have a care farm which works with adults with learning disabilities. As I mentioned, volunteering, both outdoors and inside in the office. And we have our cafe. We also run short courses, activities through the holidays. We have free farm trails for people to come and access, picnic area, a whole range of projects, and that's developing and evolving all of the time. Anything we can think of that utilises the farm, the landscape and the environment to benefit the local and wider community.
So Charlotte's taken diversification to the ultimate extreme, really, haven't you?
I guess so, but actually what we saw that was what we're doing today at Fordhall isn't really new. It was things that have been done on farms right across the country for decades and centuries, and it just things would naturally happen. The whole community used to be involved with the farm. Everyone came and helped at harvest time. Children always played out on the farms. That's just the places that they were. You knew all the local farmers, you knew whose land was owned by everybody, you knew where your meat was coming from when you went and bought it from the butcher because it was all the local people. And over the last 50, 60 years really, it's changed so dramatically, so quickly, and we've gone so far away from that to the point where people are getting shouted at for going on a private field. You know, there's this whole get off my land thing with the farmer coming out with a shotgun, and people not knowing where their food comes from, children not knowing how food is produced. And really what we've put a structure around something that really used to exist very naturally. And we've got all these different names for our youth project and care farm, but traditionally a lot of kids that weren't that good at school would go out and work on the farms, and sometimes it was people with learning disabilities that would become farm workers, and that was their place, and it was something they were good at and they could contribute and they could be part of the wider community. So again, we're taking diversification to the whole, we might be reinventing things, but it's not really new. We can't really lay claim to inventing anything, we're just restructuring it, I guess.
Yeah, but there's a dysfunction here, isn't there? Because farms have become closed places and not community places. And yet a community farm was the norm and is what a farm should be today. So Charlotte says that people really do care about what goes on a farm. And Marion Regan on the strawberry farm, she also told me that she feels very supported by her village. They care about her farm, they want to buy local berries, and of course in Kent you don't have to go back very far to find a link between local people and fruit. So, here I am. I'm on my farm. The sun is setting. I can see the Malvern Hills in the distance. The carrots have been put to bed for the winter. The animals are tucked up for the night. I've got the pigs down here, the sheep over there. The soil in my hands, the dirt under my nails. But is it any good? The soil? Because that's the most important thing, isn't it? That's the future of everyone's farm, the soil. And I don't know enough about it. So I took myself back to see Caroline and Susannah.
How do we really improve our soil quality, improve the soil organic matter status, right through to actually spread that message so that more and more farmers are changing practices?
There are more microorganisms in a teaspoonful of soil than there are people on the planet.
We have, we've been working on it for some time to build a cross-sector programme of research on soil management.
It seems that the achievement of sustainable agriculture was let down in the 20th century when research concentrated more on pesticides and fertilisers and neglected the soil's biological factor. We're creating soils that aren't fit for anything except for holding a plant up.
And the principle behind it is really about how we can provide an understanding and better information about how we can best manage and conserve and make most use of our valuable soil resource.
Because it can take 1,000 years for just 1 centimetre of topsoil to form. And today, we're losing the equivalent of 30 football pitches of fertile soil every minute.
The principle behind it is that we understand soil as a living ecology. And actually tapping into that understanding, how we can better understand aspects of soil health.
Upon this handful of soil, our survival depends. Husband it and it will provide our food and surround us with beauty. Abuse it and the soil will collapse and die, taking humanity with it. A Sanskrit text.
We've probably disregarded, we've shown insufficient respect for the soil resource, because actually it is pretty resilient. We can do an awful lot with it, and it's still there. And in many cases, it retains its fertility over decades, even though we might be cropping on it, we might be misusing it, or not treating it to its full potential.
Apparently, the UK only has about 100 harvests left. I think Franklyn D. Roosevelt summed it up really, didn't he, when he said, "The nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." Can you talk to me about your soil?
I know for a fact it is very rich.
Why is that, Frieda?
I couldn't, really put my hand on a certain thing, but I feel that it should always be left like that.
And not built on?
Because you could go out there and plant, we'll say, where are we now? April, aren't we? Should be planting potatoes now, really. You wouldn't, if you went about 30 miles from here, you wouldn't be able to be doing the same.
Why?
Because it's just that slice of land what was taken back from the seas.
Because the sea used to be right up to here.
Up here, absolutely.
So we're very close to the sea here.
Oh, absolutely, because at that corner there would say something wrong with the electrics or something, and of course the road people had to dig and dig and dig. Going down and feeling and this, and it was all cockle shells. Now what does that tell you? It's been a marsh sometime.
And is that what gives the soil its rich quality?
This is why it's got this very rich quality, because nothing else has been on it.
That's enough of that, I think. I get the point. I understand that we have to look after the soil if we want to be able to farm in the future. I'm on my farm. I'm in my boots. I've got one foot on the tractor. I get that we have to nurture the soil if we want there to be a future. But what future? The future that we haven't yet talked about? Brexit. What is the future of farming in this country going to be like after Brexit?
I think I perhaps underestimated the enormity of it. So we as the NFU took a very neutral stance. We didn't want to tell people which way to vote, but our official line was that we believed farmers would be better if they remained within the EU.
So I didn't vote to leave the EU, but from the point of view of farming, I think there are going to be some consequences all round, some of which might be positive for our sector.
However, now that we have voted out, it's quite worrying because a lot of farmers only survive because of their payment, the cap payment from Europe. So if those subsidies are removed, maybe food would reach a better price in the market. If farmers got a fair return for their food, they wouldn't be so reliant on subsidies.
In terms of Brexit, then there are a huge number of questions with regard to horticulture, obviously the future of labour.
We are hugely dependent on a large number of people from Eastern Europe to come and pick our crops.
The access to where those workers are going to come from has been a very big issue and will continue to be for the sector.
There are question marks, particularly about pesticide legislation.
A lot of our regulation comes from Europe, and that is quite stifling.
A crop in this country without access to products that will help us protect our fruit and veg. So plant protection products, pesticides and insecticides. And these are difficult words because they're very emotive and they're very easily misunderstood.
Personally, I see it as an opportunity to influence policymakers and decision makers to reward things that farmers do.
The reality is that we have a very maritime climate. That means we have a lot of cloudy, damp weather, and that gives us a lot of mildew issues on our crops. And we need to be able to protect our crops from those mildews. And the regulation around all of that sits in Europe.
I'm nervous that we're going to be sold down the river for other deals, and that's going to open the door to low welfare, low environmental standard produce coming here.
My big fears about now is that agriculture doesn't get recognition for where it should be.
If you look at the real politics and you look at where agriculture sits in relation to the priorities that the government will have in its negotiations, I think even the most optimistic of us have to recognise that it's going to be fairly low down the list.
We've got to state what we offer and, actually what we can offer in the future.
The reality is that farming in this country is going to have to face a future where it has to stand pretty much on its own 2 feet.
But what will farming actually be like? I mean, can you tell me what you think farming will be like in this country in, say, 50 years' time?
You could have warned me about that one. I could have just perhaps thought about that for 10 minutes.
In an ideal world, Britain would have community CSAs dotted around every city.
We really need to focus on the resources we've got. And for me, it's about adding value to what we produce.
So that may be vertical farming, particularly in and around cities.
I think we should be getting more out of a hectare of land, not least in terms of in yield.
People eating less, better quality meat and paying more for it is a model that I think would be good.
Well, for me, the obvious thing there is nutrition. So in the future, I think we're going to be drawing down on more innovative technology, automation, more remoteness of managing some of the crop monitoring, crop decision making, forecasting the tools that we use.
But quite what it's going to look like when I'm 70, I don't really know.
For labour, but also I think a great attribute will be that you'll be able to treat different parts of a field, different parts of a crop in different ways. I can see that in the future you may go to a field and see a number of robots rushing around doing various jobs.
We are facing probably the biggest period of change that agriculture has faced in centuries. Change always brings challenges. This is going to be a make or break time for much of the agricultural industry. If we think we can do something about it, we blooming well better had.
So, food for thought. And I think it's probably time to set aside my possible future as a farmer and find out a little bit more about what you think about some of the issues that we've been talking about with them. What do you think about Brexit? What do you think farming will look like in 50 years' time? What do you think we can do about the disconnect that there is between life on farm and the experience in a supermarket? How can we get young people into farming? Do women have a particular role to play in farming or not? And do you think this is a good, interesting, useful forum to discuss those issues in? And I know that Rosemary has agreed to chair a little moment of discussion, so if you'd like to do so, Rosemary, you can have my place.